Hey all, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be working on making a petticoat that I will be wearing under all of the clothes that I will be making for myself now that I'm on this journey to revamp my wardrobe into a history-bounding, environmentally friendly collection of garments. I have chosen to center my new wardrobe around the 1940s and 50s silhouettes, that being anywhere from really like early 1940s to the mid 1950s, because I am a big fan of the broad shoulders of the 1940s, primarily because I have them naturally, so I don't have to do that much. But the nipped-in waist and the big skirts of the 1950s, and particularly inspired by the new look by Christian Dior in 1947. And if you don't know what that is, please look it up. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. So for the pattern for the petticoat, I made it myself. For the main skirt, I have a 3/4 circle skirt that I drafted using my measurements. And I drafted it using my uncorseted measurements because I knew I would be gathering it into a yoke. But I can explain down in the description the math that you use to get to a 3/4 circle skirt. And I can also explain how to do a full circle skirt because that's very helpful. And I have a yoke that the skirt will gather into, which will be flat into the waist. And I got this by drafting a basic pencil skirt, as you do when you are pattern drafting. Drafted the basic pencil skirt and then just did the slash and spread method of closing the dart to just make it a flat yoke. Originally when I was drafting the skirt and I was drafting from my corseted measurements, the front and I drafted the front and the back based on the instructions that I have. And I didn't like how the front was looking, so I will just be using two of the back piece that I drafted. Will just be the front and the back. And there will be two yokes, a front and a back, 4 skirt pieces with seams at center front, side seams, and center back. And then I will be putting a ruffle at the bottom. And the ruffle, I'm making this out of a white cotton sateen that I got from Joann's. It is a drapery lining that I will put a link in the description for. I believe it's the Rocklon Renaissance lining. It's 100% cotton, and it is technically a cotton sateen. It's not the nicest cotton sateen. And it's also not what I intended to make this petticoat out of. I really wanted to make it out of cotton poplin because that's what we made petticoats out of at the theater that I used to work at, and I like how they behave. But you can't buy cotton poplin in Joann's, and I didn't want to go out to S.R. Harris because I'm trying to avoid going to places right now because COVID things. And I was looking online for ordering it and ultimately got impatient and I just walked through Joann's and found a fabric that would work, and this will behave fine. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if I hate it, I can always use it as a Renfest petticoat because those I don't care about as much. If I do end up wanting to do a cotton poplin. I also was looking for an ivory and they didn't have ivory, which is another reason why I'm like, maybe this will just end up being a costume piece rather than actual garment, but who knows? Maybe I'll end up making all of my undergarments white now. That's a question for another time. Regardless, I purchased 4 yards of the drapery lining, and I have, for the ruffles, I cut them 6 inches wide, and each skirt panel gets a ruffle that is 2 yards long that gathers down to this measurement, which is roughly 36 inches. I think it's 39, but 36 for easy mental math. So it's approximately a 2-to-1 gather, which when you're thinking about how much fullness you want in a ruffle, it's important to consider those measurements. And so I ordered, as I said, I ordered 4 yards of the lining from Joann's, and I cut, there are 4 strips that are 6 inches by 2 yards long, which is a lot of gathering. I think technically right now I cut just 6-inch by 4-yard strips, and I may cut them in half to have seams to match, but I may not. Depends on how frustrated I get while I'm sewing, because gathering 4 yards all at once sounds really stressful and dumb, and like it's gonna break a lot. The gathering threads will break a lot, but we'll figure that out when we get there. And I also just know, like, I can cut it if I need to. So that being said, I'm gonna get to cutting this. Oh, I want to mention, so as you can see on this pattern, maybe, yes, I have a couple of different grain line options, which will be, I will be using the one with the center, the grain line going down the center of the panel. So all of the seams will be slightly on, not a true bias, but a bias. And I don't have any good reason for why I'm doing that, other than I don't want the center front and center back to be on the grain and have the side seams be on like a super bias, just because I don't like it. I don't like how it looks. And I will also be adding 3 tucks into the skirt of the petticoat for decoration, because I will eventually be making a chemise Lorraine inspired dress, which is open in the front as you see the petticoat, and so I do want it to be a little decorative, but not too decorative, because I like, don't want to put more work into this. In all of my undergarment adventures in creating my new wardrobe, I think I'm gonna go more on the utilitarian side of things rather than being more frilly as historical undergarments were, just because I don't want to take the time if I don't have to. So, and those 3 tucks will be, they will finish 1/2 inch wide, so they are 1-inch tucks, if you're thinking about it that way. And the length of the petticoat will finish at 26 inches, which is 1 inch shorter than all of my skirt hems will be, or my skirt length will be. My skirt length is always 27 inches because that hits right below the knee. Actually slightly below the knee. It actually hits about where my leggings hit, but that's where I like my skirts to hit. So I figure cut it a little bit shorter than the skirt to have it not show. So the yoke is 6 inches deep. When all is said and done with the seam allowances and the tucks, etc., the skirt will finish 15 inches, which if we're adding is 21 total length, and then the ruffle with the seam allowance included that got cut at 6 inches goes down to 5 inches, and that gets us to 26. So all I have to cut, I've cut the ruffles, so all I have left to cut are the skirt panels and the yokes, and then I get to start sewing. All right, I have all the main pieces cut out. I forgot to mention that I will be cutting a waistband, which will get cut out of this cotton as well as a layer of fusible interfacing, which will be Shape Flex, which is a fusible cotton interfacing. I haven't figured out how wide the waistband will be yet, so I will tell you that momentarily. So now I'm done cutting everything and I will get to work on serging the pieces and then constructing the petticoat. I believe I'm going to serge the seams that join the yoke to the skirt and the skirt to the ruffle once those pieces are attached so that there's less bulk, because serging a piece and then gathering it creates so much more bulk, and I'm not that inclined to do that. But I think I will serge the sides, like the straight seams of the skirt and the side seams of the yoke and the short seams of the ruffle separately, join those together and then do the rest of the serging. I also did not mention that this will be open on one side, probably the left side, and I have just realized that I did not give myself good seam allowance to do a placket, so I might have to add a placket, but I'll figure that out. Yeah. It's the next day and I have all of my pieces serged on the long straight sides of the skirt pieces and the side seams of the yoke and the short seams of the ruffles, and I have pinned them and I will be sewing them together. And as I mentioned in the serging clip, I will also be sewing the skirt pieces and the yoke pieces from bottom to top in order to counteract the bias. I still think once the whole thing is together, I will be letting it hang for a couple days and then measuring. I'll just let it hang on my mannequin and then measure the length of the skirt and even it out all the way around to get the bias to droop and do its thing. But this just helps it to not droop so much. I also, so I've pinned one of the yoke seams because the other one will be left open to get into the garment since it's a fitted yoke. And I have pinned 3 of the 4 skirt seams because I will, once those seams are done, I will do the 3 tucks, which I figured it would be easier to do that while most of the pieces are sewn together, but while it's also not a circle, because it was going to be easier to mark as a flat array rather than doing it as a sewn skirt. So I'll check back in with you once all of the things are sewn. I've got all of my seams sewn, and now I'm going to run the gather stitches along the top of the skirt to connect it to the yoke. And I think I'm going to do 2 lines of gathering, one at 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric and one at 3/8 since my seam line is at 1/2 inch. So 2 sets of lines, and I'm also going to do 2 sets of gathering lines per panel. So it will start at the end, go to the middle of the panel, and then go from the middle of the panel, have another, like, stop, cut the thread, have another set that goes to the side seam, just because I think with how long this is, I would rather have more gathering stitches than less. So yeah, I'll get that going, and once that's done, I will connect the yoke to the skirt, and then I will let it hang. I'll probably attach the waistband, and then I will let the petticoat hang for a couple days before putting in my pin tucks. It's been a few days since I've updated you all on this petticoat. Things that I have accomplished since I last checked in are I slip stitched the waistband down after attaching the waistband, and I have sewn in the hook and bar closure. I still need to add in a backup snap, as is my practice in theater, and my goodness, I am a creature of habit, so I don't plan to stop that now. Also, after letting the petticoat hang for a couple days, I leveled out the hem. It ended up only dropping about 1/4 of an inch on the places where the bias was the strongest, except for the center back seam that dropped about 1/2 an inch, and I leveled it out. And now I'm going to start marking the tucks, and I will explain that process and then get into how I pin them. I'm going to explain the process of how I do the marking for the pin tucks. I will be using a Pilot friction pen, which is spelled Frixion. These are my favorite things. Pens for marking when you need to mark and have them go away. I know there are erasable pens and washable pens that are available otherwise, but the reason I like these is that they're comfortable to hold, and also the way they work is they're an erasable pen, but you can mark it on fabric and then use your iron to, the heat takes the lines away, which is just much faster than having to wash a garment before you want to wear it. So I need to do some math to figure out where these tucks are going to go. I know I need to leave 1/2 an inch of seam allowance to connect the ruffle to the bottom of the skirt. I'm going to place, okay, I need 1/2 an inch of seam allowance, and then I want to have a 2-inch gap between the bottom of the tuck and the ruffle. So that's 2.5 inches up. And then I need the stitching line to be another 1/2 inch up to allow for the 1/2 inch tuck to lay flat. So I'm going to mark my first line at 3 inches all the way around. I know the next stitching line for this is 1 inch up, and then I want 1/4 inch of space between each tuck, which means my next stitching line will go 3/4 of an inch, which is the 1/4 of an inch of breathing room, and then the next stitching line where the tuck will be folding over. And I'll mark my next inch up for the next stitching line, another 3/4, and another inch. So I'm going to go around the whole petticoat and just continue marking these lines, starting at 3 inch, then 1 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch. Go along the whole way, and then I'll show you how to pin the pin tucks. So now that I have the tucks marked, I am going to show you how I pin them. You can see I'm starting at the side where the opening is that will sit on my hip, just so that all of my back stitching is in a consistent location, because that will make me happier. I'm going to start with the bottom tuck, because as I'm working, it will be easiest to do the bottom first, rather than doing the top tuck and then trying to negotiate the second tuck in while this is still all messy. Because I can't press these one at a time, I have to wait until they're all done because of the heat erase marker that I'm using. So I'm going to start by pinning my lines together, and I'm pinning it so that as I put the tuck through the machine, I'm looking at the top of the petticoat rather than the bottom. So the top rather than the bottom where the ruffle will be attached. And the important thing to remember with these type of tucks is that your stitching lines are not the same length, because the way that circumferences of circles go, this circle that we made all the way around is slightly smaller than this outer circle, which is the one on the bottom. And so as you're going along, you just have to remember that those aren't going to match up. You might have some small tucks underneath where the fabric wants to bunch up, and that's not the worst. If I were being really particular, I would run an E-stitch along this line, but I'm not going to do that simply because I just can't be bothered. So, but if I was like really wanting to make this look absolutely perfect, that's what I would do. So I'm gonna get to pinning and get to sewing all these tucks. It's another day. I have gotten all of the tucks sewn into the petticoat and pressed them all out, and they all turned out beautifully. I think with each of the tucks, I think I had to rip out roughly 4 to 5 sections where the line didn't line up on the bottom with the one on the top, just to be really finessed about it. But other than that, I think they turned out great. I have also gone ahead and hemmed the bottom edge because that will be easier to do now rather than once I put the ruffle on. And I did this by pressing a 1/4 inch up and then folding that and stitching it. So it's a total of a 1/2 inch hem. And I have also marked each panel, which my panels are 4 yards long. I have marked those into 1/8 so that the seams of the panels will go on the side seams of the petticoat, and then each panel gets half of the strip. So then each of that half is divided in 4, making 1/8 total. And I have run gathering stitches at 3/8 and 1/2 inch away from the cut edge, same as I did for the attaching the skirt to the yoke. And I have a lot of pinning to do, and that is where I'm at. It's so close to being done. I have now attached the ruffle, and now all I have left to do is serge the seam, connecting the ruffle to the skirt, and do the top stitching to get the seam allowance to lay down flat like I did on the skirt and the yoke seam. There is top stitching there, and don't know if you can see it. And then I need to add a snap on the waistband tab extension, just for a little bit of extra security, and then it'll be done. And with that, my petticoat is finally done. I'm really happy with how it came out. It twirls really well. which is very exciting because I love to twirl in a skirt. It ended up becoming about roughly a circle skirt, even though I used a 3/4 circle skirt pattern, but that's what happens when you gather things down and make things bigger than your actual measurements, which is totally fine. Also, were I to do this again, I will say that my side seams are not actually on the side seams of my body, which annoys me in general, but because it's a petticoat and I like having the even distribution of fullness, that's more important to me than having the side seams on the actual side seams. So I'll let it go. But yeah, and I think it's a good length, and I've tried it on with a couple of my dresses and it works perfectly. So yeah, I'm very excited to get to wear this under my new clothes. Please like this video to let me know you enjoyed your time here, subscribe to my channel so you never miss another video, and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all on the flip-flop.